Well, welcome everybody to the April Throws Event Group meeting. I'm very sorry about last month. We had a changeover in staffing, and I just couldn't quite get ready in time. So we'll just go through the quick agenda for tonight. First of all, I want to thank Daryl Snyder. I want to welcome Irene Godette. We're going to go through some rules clarifications. And if you have any questions, we'll field those questions, and then we'll talk about a next meeting. So first of all, I want to thank Daryl Snyder very much. He agreed to be an event leader with myself, and he was responsible for adding probably 150 emails to a Gmail account so that you could all be communicated with and know when a meeting was or any information that we wanted to send out. We collaborated on what our sessions were going to be on, etc. And for those of you who maybe don't know Daryl personally, he's a wealth of knowledge in the throws area, as he had sons who competed internationally, and he is just a person who really likes the throws event. So he is stepping back for personal reasons. I'm wishing him all the best. I wish that he were still going to be serving with us, but at this point in time, he needs to step back. So we'll allow him that luxury for the moment, but I'm not going to forget about him. So I have recruited Irene Godette. She lives in Alberta, just outside Edmonton, and she's going to be stepping in to assist with the throws event group and communications. She's an experienced official in throws, jumps, combined events. She's presently the Alberta officials chair for athletics, and you will be receiving emails from Irene, although I think Daryl's name is still on our Gmail account. But regardless, if you're receiving emails from Irene, it's legitimate. So welcome Irene to our to the upper echelon of the throws event group. I've chosen 4 different rules to clarify because I've had a number of questions on them in the past while. And one is a rules change on judges' flags. The other one is number of trials for an event and going on to the final 3 rounds. A replacement trial, and then clarification of what near and far sides of the cage are and what are the limits of the cage, since those are now within the rules and we need to know how to interpret those. First of all, a quick clarification on judges. It happens to be competition rule 19.4. The appropriate judge shall normally indicate the validity or invalidity of a trial by raising a white or red flag as appropriate. Alternate visual indication may be approved. World Athletics is moving towards a lot of bells and whistles and flashing lights. So if any of you watch the indoor championships from Belgrade, you saw in long jump now, there is no longer an official sitting at the board. It's a flashing pillar that is, well, it's controlled by a computer, and it flashes as green if it's good, and it flashes red if it's a fault. So these are approved around the throwing area as well. Right now, so far for throws, we have an official showing flags still, but just so you know, it might be flashing lights in the future. Same thing for the time clock. We're supposed to raise a yellow flag with 15 seconds remaining on the trial time clock. Alternate visual indication may be approved, and that means a flashing light of some kind, possibly, just to make you aware of that. Not a big deal for us. I think in our daily meets, we'll still be using flags. And sorry, I've mentioned this already. So might be flashing lights instead of the flag. Now for field event trials, Technical Rule 25.6 states that in horizontal field events where there are more than 8 athletes, and more than 8 is the key point here, each athlete shall be allowed 3 trials, and the 8 athletes with the best valid performances are allowed 3 additional trials, unless the applicable regulations provide otherwise. What does that mean? If there are greater than 8 athletes, you must have a valid performance to move on to the final 3 rounds. And that might mean that you're taking less than 8 athletes to the final 3 rounds if there are a number of athletes that have invalid performances and don't have a valid trial within the first 3 rounds. Regulations might stipulate what the proviso at the end there was, if regulations don't state otherwise. The regulations are regulations that are only for that particular meet. They might stipulate the number of athletes moving to the final rounds or the number of rounds to be granted. In a university meet I did just in February, the meet director decided that the top 9 athletes would receive the final 3 rounds. And technical delegates or the meet director may decide this, but it's in the regulations and everybody knows ahead of time. In the Diamond League, they sometimes decide that all the throwers get 4 rounds. There won't be final 3 rounds. Everybody's getting 4, and we decide winners from there. But that is stated in the regulations. And once again, I mentioned this already, that since you need a valid performance with more than 8 athletes, it may cause you to have less than 8 go to the finals. Now, if there are 8 athletes or fewer, each athlete shall be allowed 6 trials, unless the applicable regulations provide otherwise. So if there are less than 8 athletes, all the athletes receive 6, regardless of whether they have a valid performance or not. Because there's under 8, they all get 6. And the regulations, again, might stipulate the number of athletes moving to the final rounds or the number of rounds to be granted. Like I said, in the Diamond League, there's most often less than 8 athletes, or 8 or less. And the meet director, for time commitments, because it's a 3-hour TV window, they just say, everybody's getting 4, that's it. And it's very easy to time, you know exactly what the beginning and the end of that event will be. Just a note under the field trial number, it's note 3. The regulations of the relevant governing body may specify the number of trials, provided it is no more than 6, and the number of athletes which may progress to each additional round of trials after the 3rd. So as I mentioned before, sometimes they're limited to 4. Sometimes the number of athletes might be increased to get the additional 3 trials, the final 3. And that's well within the parameters of regulations. So here, once again, we've gone over this, but just so that you're clear, the regulations might state the number of rounds or the number of athletes moving on. The field event order, Note 4, the regulations of the relevant governing body may specify that the competing order be changed again after any further round of trials after the third. So we all know that the rules in the major rules, they've gone back to, we're only reordering after the third round. It's not in the rules that we're always doing it after the fifth round, but the regulations may stipulate that. So if they do, you have to reorder again after the fifth round. The regulations might also stipulate that only the top 4 received the 6th round of trials and in the reverse order. So you're reordering once again after, the 5th round, and only 4 get that 6th round. This was tried in the World Athletics indoors, and it builds suspense, and it also forces the athletes to every round is important if you want to receive that that final round of trials. So just be aware, you need to look at the regulations as well to see if there's any changes from the major World Athletics rules. A replacement trial, just the order or some of the parameters that are involved with a replacement trial. We all know if for any reason beyond their control, an athlete is hampered in a trial and is unable to take it, or the trial cannot be correctly recorded, the referee shall have the authority to award them a replacement trial or to reset the time either partially or in full. So if a replacement trial is awarded, no change in the order shall be permitted. In other words, the replacement trial has to happen right away. A reasonable amount of time shall be allowed according to the particular circumstances of the case. So it is not a consecutive trial. So there's nothing in the rule book that says they need 2 minutes, or in the case of jumps, there are different time allotments. It's not a consecutive trial. It is a replacement trial. So the referee has the ability to decide if they want to do 3 minutes or 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 1 minute. It's up to the referee, whatever reasonable time is. So it's very, very important to note, though, if a replacement trial is to be granted, it's not at the end of the round, or it's not when the athlete wants to or thinks they're ready. It's within a reasonable time, and it's right away. Now, in the case that the competition has progressed and for some reason or other, it's deemed that an athlete needed a replacement trial, when that occurs, as soon as it's deemed that they need a replacement trial, then it's to happen right away. But usually it's right after if an implement breaks, or in the case that there's if you're using electronic measuring and for some reason or other, there's not a reading, or the spike was pulled before a reading was made. Those are type things where you might have to do a replacement trial in throws. Now, let's talk about far side and near side of the cage. In the last year or so, the rule book has mentioned the far and near side of the cage. And up until now, we really have never had to worry about that. Under note 1 of technical rule 32.14, it says it shall be considered a failure if the discus or head of the hammer strikes the far side of the cage after the release of the implement. So basically, a very easy way of figuring out what near side and far side is. The gate that's closed is the far side. The gate that's open, that's the near side. That's just an easy way. The release side, that's the near side. The non-release side is the far side. It's just an easy point of reference. Note 2, it will not be considered a failure if the discus or any part of the hammer strikes the near side of the cage, with the proviso that the implement lands within the landing sector, of course, and outside the limits of the cage, provided no other rules are infringed. So what does inside the limits of the cage mean? Well, the limits of the cage shall be defined as the boundary formed by the cage and the gates when in position, completed by an imaginary straight line drawn between the ends of the cage or gates closest to the landing sector. Now, for those of you who are visual learners, we have a very fancy diagram that's come from one of the ATOs from Australia. But if you can see now, yes, I can. This is the gate that is closed. On the left side here, this is the gate that is closed. So this over here is the gate that's open. So the closed gate, draw a line from the edge of the closed gate to the pillar or post or the hinge point of the other gate. This is inside, and anything outside that point is outside. So it's the hinge point on the open gate to the closed gate edge, and that's whether inside or outside. So this is the near side of the cage where the gate is open. So it hits here, and if it falls here, you're okay because it's in the sector and it's gone outside the cage, the limits of the cage. If it hits here and somehow or other it rebounds back into here, this is a fault because it's inside the cage. So, and you know what, we'll take questions and we'll clarify this if it isn't clear. I've got another diagram here. I think it's a little more difficult when you're talking a discus cage because the discus, because most of the time we're not using the gates in discus. But once again, for a right-handed thrower, this is near side because this is the release side. This is the non-release side, so this is the far side. Okay, and the hinge points of the cage or the gates is inside or outside. So I hope that makes it a little clearer for you as to what inside, outside, and near side and far side are. Oh, that's good. We got nothing on that one. Oh, you know what? It's coming up, I'm sure. Oh, Selena has raised her hand. You know what? While we're waiting for this slide to come up, why don't you unmute yourself, Selena, and go ahead.
Okay, I unmute myself. They didn't mention anything about the handle of the hammer or the wire touching the outside. Does that fault too, or it's just the hammer head?
Just the hammer head. So the handle and the wire like aren't really included. Well, I mean, they're part of the implement, but just like the hammer head has to land within the sector, doesn't matter where the handle or the wire hit. Yeah.
Okay, and then on that note, what happens? Was there a rule that if that's only considered the gate, what about the cage? Has that changed? If it hits the cage and it lands on the inside, is that changed at all? Would that be a fault if it hits the cage rather than the gate?
Well, it would land. The problem is it's going to land within the it's going to land within the inside the cage, correct?
Yeah, because
So
we used to measure that before when it landed in, but now we're
it's
not.
still going to be a fault. Yeah, it's still going to be a
Okay.
fault.
Okay, that's good to know. We don't have run in and merger anymore.
And you know what? Before this worked, I don't know why it's not. Oh, here we go. Since there's so much information on this, this just shows you, this slide just shows you the discus and the hammer cage at the same time. So you see inside, outside, you see near side, far side. That's all. The other ones were a little larger and probably a little easier to see. Here you see the line on the hammer where it determines inside, outside, but it's still the pivot point of the gate. So now if you would all like to unmute yourself, if you have any questions or concerns, or I've totally baffled you with some of these things, you can, you're free to ask or a clarification. It doesn't even have to be on these rules. It can be on anything that you'd like. If there are any questions or concerns.
Jane, I have a question.
Is that Mark?
Yes. Okay, so if the athlete's throwing a hammer and say they're right-handed and the just a handle of the hammer kind of brushes up that wing as it takes off the hand, but the hammer goes out and lands in the sector and it's in the sector, is the fact that that handle maybe have brushed the wing on the left side, did that make that an invalid throw or not?
No, it's the hammer head.
Okay, you said, okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
No,
thanks.
no, that's okay. Better to ask now because we're all calm here and nobody's screaming and yelling.
Okay.
It's the no, it's the, you know, I'm just looking because I want to make sure that I'm telling you the right thing. I'm looking at it once again.
Okay, I just-
32:14. It shall be considered a failure if the discus or head of the hammer strikes the far side of the cage. So when you're mentioning the wing, okay? So if the wire or the handle brush that wing, but it still lands within the sector outside, you're all right.
Okay, thanks.
It's the head of the hammer.
Okay.
Now, it's interesting because the near side of the cage, the reading is any part of the hammer strikes the near side of the cage. So if the let's say the handle were to touch the near side of the cage and then the hammer lands within the limits of the cage, it's still going to be a fault.
Oh, that's confusing.
No, it's within the limits of the cage. Okay.
Oh, okay. So does that mean if it hits anywhere in the cage or the gate and it lands inside the cage is a fault, but if it lands on the outside the cage is okay? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions or concerns?
Hello?
Jeff?
Oh, yeah. Looking at the part of 32:14 that's just above 32.15 about the limits of the cage, and it seems to include the gates. The diagrams you show have the pivot point between the main part of the cage and the movable gate as the end. So where is this imaginary line to be drawn?
Let's give you the bigger diagram. Okay, so this is the pivot point over here on the left side, right? This is a pivot point. This is the gate. On the near side, this is the pivot point. And this is the gate. So from the edge of the gate that is closed, go across to the pivot point or the hinge of the gate that's 6 meters apart, correct? So it goes out in a little bit of an angle.
Yeah. Now,
That's how you determine inside, outside.
the limits of the cage, again, I'm reading from the book here, the limits of the cage seems to include the cage and the gate. So that yellow, by what I read here, the yellow line should go to the end of the gate, not the pivot point. The rule doesn't mention the pivot point.
This is what World Athletics has released as a definition for inside and outside.
Okay,
That's, you know what, it might defy logic, but this is what they have determined is inside and outside.
okay.
And I think there were 2 more raised hands, but right now I don't have,
Selena,
okay,
Oh, yeah, I got a quick question. To measure that yellow line from the pivot point to the end of the cage, how do you suggest we measure, like, are we bringing ropes? Are we taping the
No.
grass? Are we?
it would be like a visual, because your gate is 2 meters, correct? So
Not
this,
always.
well, they're supposed to be roughly 2 meters wide. And so, and this is going into the sector, so it's an eyeball type thing, where if in doubt, you would measure. If you know, if it's well beyond the gate, or if it's, sorry, if it's well within the hinges of the gate, it's definitely inside. That's easy. If, as I say, you're unsure, like if it lands like right about, you know, here, you don't have a line out there, if in doubt, measure. Or if it's really close, you could have a rope, you could use like a tape measure, and you could run a tape from this to the hinge, and you determine it's inside or outside depending on where the mark was. Similar to what you do when if an implement lands close to the sector line. Is the mark on the sector line? Is it inside the sector line? Is it outside the sector line? Correct?
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Do we have any more questions or concerns or clarifications needed?
can I just see the discus one again? The
Most
hammer one, I
definitely.
think I've gotten
Okay.
in my head.
The discus only, there you go. It's this one, right?
Okay,
It's more difficult to see on this because they don't have the hinge points of the gates. But this distance up here that says 6 meters, what is 6 meters? The 6 meter distance is the pillars that are the mainstay of your cage, and then the gates are attached to those, correct? So it's the hinge point. For discus, it's a little easier too, in that it's going to be a straight line going across if you're not using gates at all. And remember, in the last, the rules update, you may use the gates in discus. In other words, I can close the far side gate, just like in hammer, if I feel there's a need for safety. Just, you know, like, I haven't seen it done in a competition, but it depends on the layout and what other events are going on. There's the potential that it's, and in discus, the discus is much smaller and it doesn't seem like a cave like in hammer where you've got that 3 meter, you know, radius going around, or sorry, that meter radius going around. And it just seems like the exit point is so small when the gate is closed. Selena, is your hand
Yes, I got
still
silly.
up?
Yeah, I got a silly question. So in discus, what happens? You get the little kids who's gonna throw it, it's gonna hit the far side and hits the pole and it lands in and they like it, right? The little ones. If they hit the pole on the left side, is that still considered no good if the gate
It's
is
still
wide open?
considered, it's still considered a foul, yes.
Is it? Oh, okay.
Just like for a decathlete or heptathlete, no, not a heptathlete, they're not throwing discus, but for a decathlete, they sometimes you're just excited they get it into the sector someplace. It can't hit the far side. It's a foul. Unfortunately.
Got it. Got it. Thank
No, not to worry.
So Jane,
Yes, Greg.
Greg here. In the case where a decision was made to use the gates because the discus was very close to like a long jump or the edge of the track, on, let's say that the discus is on the right side of the track and the concern is on the right side. So you decided to use the gate for left-handed throwers to close that. You would then, I'm assuming that you, if you're using it for left-handed throwers, you'd also have to close it down for the right-handed throwers, even though it's not an issue on the other side. Would that
Right.
be correct?
Definitely, Greg, because you want to make it fair for all. And yes,
Yeah.
you're doing it for left-handers because of the safety on that side. But by the same token, they're getting a smaller distance, you know, like in quotation marks, to release out of. So yes, you would have to use the gate on the right side then for, or on the other side for a right-handed thrower for sure too.
Okay, thanks.
Once again, if you have any questions in between meeting times, and you've got the Gmail account. I think you have my personal email. Don't hesitate to contact me or our Gmail account with questions, and we'll attempt to get back to you as soon as we can. For a next meeting date, I know the indoor season has been extended into, for those of us who have indoor meets, it's kind of been extended into the April. And then I know a lot of you have started the outdoor season already, and we're much busier in the outdoor season. So my suggestion would be that we wait until the fall, September, October for our next meeting. But we could also organize one before that if the group wanted to meet. So I throw that out to you for your feedback on that. What do people think about that? Sharon, you've got your hand raised.
Hi, Jane. Question. It's always dumbfounded me. In the rules, CR 19.4 regarding the flags, when in school, we're taught to raise your hands, and the rule says to raise the flag. It doesn't say to extend the flag out. I still have a problem with it because it says to raise the flag. To raise the flag is to raise it upward, not outward. So can you just clarify exactly what we are to do? Because that lovely word to say raise raise is to go upward, not extend. So.
Right.
What?
And Sharon, I have a two-part answer here in that it depends on, sorry, I'm just trying to start my video and it won't work. It depends on whether you're talking a valid or an invalid trial or a time trial. A valid trial, like the red or white flag for a valid or invalid trial, straight up, because the reason for this flag is so the announcer can see, the spectators can see, the athletes can see. And if you were to extend it, like, let's say at straight out from your shoulder, I call that a cross. If you were to extend it straight out, like a lot of people can't see that, like through a crowd or if you're at the event site. So for red and white, straight up above your head and hold it there until your people in the field see it. And, you know, like at least a good 3-second count. So especially the people marking in the field, once you get their eye and they know it's a foul, then you're good. So that's for a valid or an invalid trial. For the time clock one, it's really important as a referee. I want to know exactly when zero happens.
Mm-hmm.
So the yellow, when it goes up at 15 seconds, think of it as a little bit of a warning.
Right.
In that the flag is going to go straight out from your shoulder, because I don't want to flash it in the athlete's face. I just want them to know, you know what, you're at 15 seconds to go. You need to get moving. It's not like it's not terribly important right this minute, but just so you know, you're getting close to the end. At zero, the flag goes straight up like a valid or an invalid trial, because that is definitely, you know what, it's over. It's zero. And
It's
once
done.
again, as a chief judge, you want to know, did the athlete start or did they not?
Mm-hmm.
When exactly did the flag go up? And there's a clear definition between the warning 15 seconds and then the zero. And like, in all honesty, in all of you, you've got a lot of years of experience. How many times have you faulted an athlete for a time fault in a throw?
Never.
Sometimes in javelin, when they start down the runway, they don't like their run up or something happened and they start again. But shot, discus, hammer, like, hey, you have measured within a minute, let alone, you know, so very rarely does even the warning go up, kind of thing. So does that clarify, Sharon?
It does. I mean, that's what we've been doing, but I've been on, and then all of a sudden in the past 5 years or so, I started seeing people extending it at 45. And some people don't even raise it when the 1 minute is done. But it's that lovely little diction of word to raise the flag. So I'm just thinking it should say at 45 seconds, the time flag should be extended. And at 1 minute, it should be raised. That way, the officials or the chief at the board will then signal also with the red flag to also double indicate as a fault. It's just the whole thing of context and wording. That's to raise the flag mean to raise it above your head. Sorry.
Right. No problem. And it nowhere in the rules does it say to, you know, go out 45 degrees at with 15 seconds to go and then raise the flag up at zero. It just, somehow you have to indicate those two things. Right. And a best practice, I guess you might call it, would be to go out 45 degrees as the warning, and then the zero is above the head. So it's very clear the time's over. Definitely.
I mean, it's practice, but it still just boggles me seeing that word. It's one of those things. Thank you so much. And if I do have any questions, I know where to find you.
No problem. No problem. Now, what does everybody feel about a next meeting time? Is the fall okay? I think this coming summer is going to be like a little busier with, well, we hope COVID will allow us to be busy. But the spring, summer are going to be quite busy with meets. And so maybe we'll convene again in the fall, if that's okay with everybody.
It's good with me.
Yep.
Super. Well, why doesn't everybody turn their video on just so we can at least see your bright, shiny faces one more time? And we will convene again in the fall then. And we welcome Irene to the upper echelons of the Throws event group, and thank her for sending out the message to you all for tonight's meeting. And I wish you all safe, healthy competitions this summer.
I'm working on changing that account so it will show as coming from me. I just haven't quite got a handle on it yet.
Listen, I was excited that you got into the account, so.
And I think there's a few emails missing. I know a few of them bounced, so they were removed. So I'll be looking for emails from the rest of the provinces. I have the Alberta ones, so all of those were added. So,
and just to all of you out there, if you have a fellow official within the province who is interested in throws, or what's this throws event group? I'm not invited. How come I'm not invited? Feel free to forward the link to them. This is not mutually exclusive. It's probably easier for you to quickly forward the link to them than add, hundreds of emails to our list. But no, if other people in other event groups would like to join us, they are more than welcome to. So please feel free to forward the link. Well, rather than, hold you forever, I'll wish you good competitions, and we'll see you in the fall, if not before.
Thanks, Jane.
sounds good.
Thanks, Jane. Have a good evening, all.
See everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.
Bye. Thank you and nice seeing everybody. Yep.
Goodbye.
Good morning, all me.